everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Nitish. I'm a partner with Everest Group and I lead our global data and AI practice. And I'm privileged here to be joined by Neil from Cognizant. Neil, welcome.
Nitesh, thank you for having me. Morning.
Morning. So Neil, let's get right in. But I wanted to also start from the beginning. Do you want to just tell our audience about your unique role at Cognizant before we get started with the conversation today?
Yeah, Nitesh, thanks for having me on the call. I'm the Global Chief Information Officer at Cognizant. Been with the firm 5 years. In my role, it's a blend of your traditional CIO role where you lead a lot of infrastructure, digital modernization, and transformation. And most recently, I've also been asked to drive a lot of AI-led change inside the company. So I'm actually looking forward to this conversation today where we can share our success stories, our best practices, and how we are servicing your clients in their space.
Perfect. In some ways, that puts you at the heart of the conversation, Neil, because you are client zero. There's no way better to talk about AI than doing it, as I always say, and you're doing it at scale. So today's conversation will try and focus on three things. One, your own client zero story and what that has taught you as a global CIO. We'll then talk about what are the learnings from the battlefields as you've scaled AI. And then we'll take a forward-looking view into the future around what does it take for AI to scale, but also what you see on the horizon. I'll try and bring in some perspective from our vantage point around clients, investors, and providers. But why don't we get started in the earnest? So I want to start really at the beginning. And we've had some conversations around this, Neil, around your own client zero story. So what drove that decision, I wonder, and what aspect of the internal transformation really surprised you the most, potentially something that you didn't expect going into it?
Nitesh, thank you for the question. So let me start off with the most basic thing, right? For us to be seen as an AI builder firm, right, moving up beyond the stage of just adopting AI and becoming an AI builder franchise, we wanted to make sure that we are very good in doing AI and transforming AI, using AI to transform the company inside out. Okay, so that was number one. Is our biggest reason for why we're driving all of this work. It's the fact that we want to be able to be seen as a proven and AI solution builder for us internally. Okay, every time when we meet a client, the first question we get asked is, Neil, can you talk a little bit about how you're using AI internally? Okay, which is why we wanted to become an AI builder enterprise. And more importantly, we wanted to make sure that we are using AI to be able to drive a lot of client-led transformations. Because of the work we have done, Nitesh, right, what we can do now is we can actually share real metrics, right? We can share some of the agentic stories and best practices and real outcomes, okay? And our internal AI blueprint is actually starting, exactly, you pointed out as client zero, it's starting to become a really good blueprint for many of the client transformations. So now what we can offer to our clients is actually a fully engineered, fully validated, fully governed, right, solution, which is actually scaled through our internal client zero model. So we can bring a lot of the best practices to bear when we go to the market because of our learnings, what we've been able to learn inside the company.
I think that's a great point because I feel that anybody's client zero story, especially on the provider ecosystem, is the ultimate form of skin in the game, right? To your point, clients want to see you drinking your own Kool-Aid or drinking your own champagne, whatever your favorite metaphor is. But I also feel the AI market has a credibility gap where lots of people are selling AI, but they're not doing AI. So I think the fact that you can show it and do it at scale, I think is really interesting. And I also think it brings in some interesting first mover advantages in terms of what worked, what didn't, trial and error. I feel clients have openness to discuss their journeys around AI because nobody's got this figured out. So your ability to test, learn, and be that builder, I think is really interesting. Let's focus on this next conversation, which lots of clients talk to us about. I'm sure they talk to you about, which is how do I move from pilot purgatory to really production at scale? I had the CIO describe this nicely to me. I've given my team a lot of toys. I want to make them tools. So how do you go from artisanal AI to industrialized AI? I believe, you've scaled agents in production at Cognizant scale. You're not stuck in that pilot purgatory, it seems. So what were your learnings on that journey? What made it successful and what would you like to share?
Yeah. Natesh, what I'll do is let me start off with how we approach the AI solution, the way in which we're thinking about solving problems, right? We look at this within Cognizant, and also what we are taking to the market across 3 vectors. Vector 1, which is really around enabling hyper-productivity using AI, right? Which is AI in software cycles, right? How do CIOs and chief digital officers and AI officers take those sort of benefits gained and reinvest that in either into savings or reinvest that towards continuous improvement, right? Vector 2 was around how do you industrialize AI? How do we move from business logic to agentic layers? How do you integrate agents with human capital? I think that is going to be the key to long-term success, right? And then Vector 3 is really around how do we transform the enterprise by reimagining, re-agentifying the whole enterprise? How do we blend human and agent workforce together? And how does that drive new roles and responsibilities within the organization? Because AI is going to create a lot of new roles down the road, which we're not even thinking about today, right? But I think Vector 3 will allow most organizations to get there. So when you think about this, right, so we start off with the basics around what do we wanted to get out of AI, right? We wanted to make sure that we're enabling uber productivity inside the company. We also wanted to make sure that we go beyond process agentification, right? And I think we wanted to bring in a higher levels of organizational context into how we are reimagining the process agentification. Then we wanted to make sure that we have an architecture which is fully connected, right? And it's fully connected end to end in a highly transformative agentic ecosystem. Okay. So the other important part of also this, Nitesh, is the key when you talk about key to success, right? Organizations need to have a singular focus, right? And I think one of the things we've been extremely fortunate and being blessed with is our CEO Ravi's dedicated focus towards it. And we have the fullest commitment from the board. Ravi is 100% invested into our transformation success using AI. Because of this, we've been able to do a lot, right? We focused on the people side of things. We've focused on the process side of things. We have focused a lot on the architectural, technological side of things. We have rolled out over 30,000 co-pilots across the company, right? And I think we're going to do more. We have over 200 plus AI solutions and use cases delivered, right? We have over 130 agents built inside the company. We have integrated a multi-agent secure architecture based on ISO principles, right? And we'll talk a little bit about responsible AI as well, right? 50,000 people have been trained, right, in AI upskilling. We have built centralized AI hubs and resources, okay? And then, we also announced this recently, right? We also, we're proud to be a holder of a Guinness Book of World Records recently because we actually, we just completed one of the largest vibe coding hackathons globally. Over 50,000 people participated, 30,000 plus MVPs were created in about 10 days. Then a remarkable accomplishment, right? The goal here was we wanted to make sure that we're enabling our associates with productivity tools, which they have never had access to before. By doing that, we can actually showcase the art of the possible in a hands-on manner rather than actually somebody else doing the work for them. Okay? We have heavily invested in cybersecurity, right? And to making sure that the work we're doing, the cyber architecture and the risk management framework is congruent to the work we're doing as a company. We're all heading in the right direction. Okay. And the other important thing for us is our Neuro engine, right? The Neuroscience engine, the AI ops platform, right? Which has actually enabled our success, right? Everything which you have seen inside the company with regards to agent orchestration, agent management, agent integration is all done through our core IP, right? Which we also have recently open sourced and which you also make available to the clients too when we build solutions, right? And then what we have also done is we have actually taken all of this, right? And we have applied this across all of the functions, right? Every function has a clear roadmap inside the company. So regardless if you look at finance, IT, HR, legal, marketing, security, you name any function, right? We have actually been able to build a dedicated AI roadmap. Go back to what I said earlier, right? Our board is supported, our CEO is extremely supportive, executive leadership and the functional leadership are fully aligned. So now we're actually, a couple of years into this program, we have a mature operating model which we actually can take to the market. Okay, so we have very clear success stories across all of these functions. And by result of all of this, Nitesh, what we have is we have one of the industry's most comprehensive AI playbook, right? Anchored on a unified multi-agent platform and an ecosystem, right? Driven by Neuro, okay? Which brings all of the functions together, helps us reimagine process using advanced context engineering skill sets and technologies, right? I think that's the key to our success. And I think at the end of the day for us, we go back to what I started with, right? enabling people, right, making sure that we have the right governance and processes and structures in place, and then building a roadmap, right, and then building the right levels of governance and visibility to be able to showcase the success back to the organization, and then almost start that flywheel effect for us, which has worked out extremely well for us.
Yeah, and I love the flywheel effect because I think one of the biggest things we see organizations struggle with is adoption. You can't just bolt on AI to existing processes, and you need to get the organization excited, especially when there's so much anxiety around AI and jobs. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Two things really stood out in your points, Neil. One, the fact that you have board and leadership buy-in for this. One of the biggest determinants of success in AI, we feel, is board and leadership AI literacy. So you really have to lean in. It cannot be just grounds up. And second, an underappreciated fact, which is architecture or architectural standards as the new unlock. Because we feel that often scale is a function of the architecture that enables it or inhibits it, not just ambition. The fact that you have tackled that head on, I think, is really interesting. And I think that's helped you move this vision at velocity. Let's talk about another, talking about underappreciated aspects. Let's talk about just org readiness and culture as a part of that. We touched upon this a little bit from a top down leadership standpoint and what you had to change. And this is what at Everest Group we like to call human at the core, not just human in the loop. So the human element, how agents and other things will now work as digital co-workers alongside our colleagues. So how did you tackle that, I wonder, right? Because at one hand, you have this anxiety around AI, and rightly so. At the same time, you see a lot of excitement around AI. So what cultural or behavioral shifts did you have to navigate to make this real and really kickstart that flywheel?
Yeah. Nitesh, we had to do a few things, right? One is, and I gave an example around the recently concluded Vibe Coding Hackathon, right? And I think that we had to make available AI available and the tools available to every single associate across the company, right? When you have 350,000 people globally at Cognizant, we wanted to make sure that everybody feels part of the solution. So we had to make sure we have the right set of tools based on the type of work they're doing and make those available. Okay, that's number one, right? And I think what it allows them to do is it takes away that sort of the myth around AI or the sort of anxieties around AI, so they can actually start feeling it, they can actually start using it to develop solutions, right? Because we're promoting, right, associate-led agent development, right? We have a model in place where actually, we're giving people tools to be able to say, hey, listen, if you have a great productivity, efficiency, or even transactional opportunity available for you, we will enable you to be able to build your own agentic solutions to be able to accomplish that, right? So number one is, so first one is making sure that our people are ready for success, right? Second thing is related to that, as I talked about the upskilling. We invested a lot in upskilling our associates to make sure that we're helping them cross the chasm. Because remember, people come to us with a lot of process knowledge, a lot of engineering knowledge, and a lot of context knowledge, right? And we need to make sure that we're helping transition that into agentic solutions, right? So the skilling part is equally important. The third, and we talked about the third one is the leadership support, right? That's a given, because I think that Ravi and the board have done an exceptional job, leaning in and being fully invested into the success of this program. Okay? The fourth one is the most important one, Nitesh. I think it's just where organizations, right, sometimes struggle with, and it sometimes becomes an afterthought, which is leading with governance, right? Leading with responsible AI, making sure that the right governance tracks are built out, right? So we have built a responsible AI framework, right, which is based on FAST principles, right? FAST stands for fair, inclusive, accountable, safe, secure, traceable, and explainable, right? And if you sort of think about it, at the end of the day, it governs every single AI workflow with human oversight, excuse me. And then we're building in kill switches integrated into the architecture that you talked about, right? While aligning with the global regulations, regardless of EU or European Act or wherever that's coming from, we wanted to make sure that our outcomes, what we are trying to build, will actually be able to operate globally based on the local geographical outcomes of the governance which are being built, right? So for us, it's an extremely important part of this, Nitesh, right? Because we truly believe it, and we're engineering that in all of the outcomes we're building. So if you put all of this together, right, it's the sponsorship, the enabling people, upskilling, tools availability, architecture, and then if you go all the way to governance, that to me is the recipe to success in this journey.
Yeah, and I think those the chronology of those line items make a lot of sense to me. Whether it's about how do you deal with AI as a team member or a coworker versus just another tool. I think you spoke about incentives and metrics a little bit. I think I always say incentives drive behavior, not the other way around. So you really need to realign what that looks like. And in some ways, when you spoke about helping colleagues cross that chasm, I feel it's also getting from that fear of AI to that fluency around AI. So the fact that you're able to bridge all of that, I think makes sense. I want to pick apart or talk a little bit about one of the things you mentioned, which again, is sometimes underappreciated in the market around governance. Sometimes it's a throwaway term, and I love the concept of fast, and I think the inherent connotation of velocity there. So can you talk a little bit about what kind of trade-offs and governance, maybe in the same breath, that you have to balance around this? From my vantage point with CIOs, what I see is often there's a question around the ROI of risk. It's very difficult to quantify and can become a bottleneck. So how do you think of responsible AI as an enabler, not just a bottleneck is one? Second, CIO budgets are still tight. So how do you balance the tightrope of innovation versus cost when you have this arms race around AI? And then there are questions around the operating model. Do you centralize this? Do you make it autonomous? And there are no clear answers around that. So I'm wondering, as you've thought about the topic of governance at the intersection of the trade-offs you have to make day in and day out in a fast-changing landscape, what have you learned and what has worked?
Yeah, Nitesh, let me take the budget question first. We'll get to the op model, and then I'll sort of close out with the governance piece, right? So once again, I've not been in the industry a long time, right? I still have not come across one place. I would not come across one CIO who's got an infinite budget available, right? At the end of the day, right? Remember, at the end of the day, my belief on this one is it's most organizations are not capital constrained, right? At the end of the day, it's more around priority because there is always working capital available. At the end of the day, it comes down to, are we applying the capital towards the right problems to solve? Okay, so what we have done is, if you think about the very traditional way of budgets getting allocated or looked at, you have the run, sort of build, transform, right? So what we have done here is the run stays the run, right? Because eventually you will get some organizational benefits, right, around op model, which will affect the run of the long term. But we have focused very heavily on the sort of the run, grow, and the transform side of the business. Historically, right? When think about it, the transformation budget is percentage are going to be much smaller. The grow budgets will be larger. What we have looked at is we're applying AI-led outcomes, AI-led reimagination, right? Driven by context engineering to drive the most amount of value. Okay. So, for example, anytime when there is a new digital initiative coming up or a data initiative coming up, the first question now our teams are asking jointly, right? Not just the IT functions, even our business leaders, our functional leaders, right? Asking us, how can I change this using AI? Or if I brought AI into this, what would the outcomes look like, right? So so that's number one, right? It has taken a couple of years to get there, and I think that the result of all of that is us being able to showcase some wins, the smaller wins, and eventually we collect the bigger wins, followed by, right, Ravi's support on this one, our CEO support on this one has definitely changed a lot of the internal sort of the culture here around how we're approaching AI, right? So think about it. So it's around being very diligent around outcomes. It's going to be the key, right? At the end of the day, to me, applying AI-led solution, right, using what we talked about earlier on, our Vector 3, Vector 2, or Vector 3 solutions, supported by context engineering is what we believe is going to win in the market in the long run, and which is how we have applied that inside the company as well. Okay. Second thing is you talked about op model, right? So historically, organizations have most IT organizations and most functions around operate in your typical pyramid model. Okay, what you're seeing happening here is we're seeing that model shift to more of an hourglass model. Okay, because you're definitely seeing more AI-enabled coding, AI-enabled testing, AI-enabled design, AI-enabled secure architecture, right? And all of these are coming into play, which is starting to squeeze the middle. Okay, we have seen really good successes, right? When it comes down to AI-developed code bases, and we're one of the few companies that publicly share that. As a firm, we're seeing about 30% of our total code generated, which is coming from AI-led sources, right? And I think we have built a secure model around it, right? And we're governing it very closely. And then then when we get to more greenfield initiatives, that number is much higher, right? So we're starting to see positive results coming from tooling coming into play, which will effectively eventually start changing the app model, right? When you go to an hourglass model, you're going to see, right, the shift from the top to the bottom. Okay, so you have that going on. And then the governance part of this is the most important one, right? Because we have been very, very diligent, right, from day one, that we will not let this become a runaway train. Right? That's the most important thing. We wanted to make sure, because the velocity of change, Nitesh, is remarkable here, right? What we thought was going to happen over the next 10 years, now we're happening in the first 3 years. Okay? So the velocity of change is absolutely remarkable. So we wanted to make sure that we have a control mechanism. And that is our responsible AI framework, the FAST model we talked about, right? And I think that is embedded into every single initiative we do inside the company and how we take that to the clients in the markets. So I think if we put all of these three together, right, I think it comes down to the point you were making early on is, what can CIOs take away from this, right? How can we reimagine the opportunities and reapply finite budgets which are available to be able to drive change in the companies?
Yeah, and I think again, I love the framing around this, and I think there's some real practical advice in terms of how to scale this. One of the biggest learnings we have had is you can't really bolt on AI on an old operating model. You have to really build with AI at the core, not at the edge, which means you have to put the hard yards in of overcoming those deficits, which lots of organizations have. And
Absolutely, Nitesh. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
I would be an analyst if I didn't have an acronym for it. So we call it the PTSD of AI: process, tech, skills, and data. I think you've touched upon all four. And those are the real hard yards you have to put in to really unlock exponential value from AI. I think what you mentioned about the practical advice around CIOs takes me to my penultimate question, which is what's up next? We're talking in the beginning of 2026. This month already seems like a decade, and I'm sure the goalpost will continue to shift in terms of what AI can do. So as you think about 2027 and beyond, as you think about this concept of the autonomous enterprise and what this will look like at scale, as we get to industrializing AI, not just artisanal AI, what's keeping you busy? What's on your radar, and what advice would you give CIOs looking to navigate this perma crisis mode?
Really good question. So we're looking at a couple of things, right? Number one, how do we improve, right, the quality of the outcomes using more purpose-built small SLM, small language models? Okay, so I think we have deployed many agentic solutions inside the company, right? And I think Neuro is backing up all of those. And I think we have relied on a lot of large language models so far to be able to deliver those outcomes. But I think we're working very closely across the different functions to be able to bring the next level of intuitiveness and intelligence, right? More focused on the work which happens in there. So we're building a lot of small language models. We're focused on a lot of small language models to sort of improve the quality of the outcomes coming out. That's number one, right? Number two is as the utilization of AI increases rampantly, right? Then I think we're also investing in internal infrastructure. We're building our GPU farms to be able to internalize some of the work, so we have better control over the trajectory and also the volume and the cost of how AI is being consumed. Okay, so then the third and the most important piece is, and I've touched upon this a couple of times so far, which is context engineering, right? The ability to be able to extract organizational context from humans and from organizations, and then feed that into the agentic layer. I think it is going to be the deal changer, right? I think that is going to be the game changer, right? If you look at the future of AI. So we're investing very heavily into context engineering, right? And I'll also say one thing, right? I know. Just going back to your broader lessons learned for CIOs and for organizations, right? And I think let me throw a couple more things out there too. Anytime when you take on an organization, a change of this magnitude, right? People tend to underestimate change management, right? And I would absolutely invest the time, as much as you're investing time in architecture, governance, make sure that you're investing the time in the right levels of change management, right? Change management also is closely related to organizational visibility, right? Make sure that you have a very clear communication story to the entire company around the value, the benefits we're getting from AI. And I said this early on, make the organization part of the solution, right? And I think that would actually help move a lot of these things faster. We touched on the governance piece, right? And then the cost discipline is an important one. Yes, because there are so many, the velocity of change is so quick. Okay, sometimes, you let things run out, and then you find out it's gotten to be too expensive, right? And I think we don't have a clear way to be able to measure the outcomes. Making sure that the cost transparency, the cost governance is equally important. Okay, and then the last piece really is making sure that your framework is safe, secure, right? And then you have responsible AI models which make it transparent and explainable. I think if we put all of this together, right, Nitesh, and I think that's in all of this. All of these are in our goals for 2026, and I think we're looking forward to all of this. And this will also make any organization successful if you bring the whole package together.
Yeah, I think that sounds like an exciting roadmap for phase 2 of the journey, and I can't wait for us to reconvene and share more. Now, Neil, I'm going to come to my last question, and I know this is going to be fun because we haven't prepped for it. So I'm going to do a lightning round, a buzzword bingo, if you will. So for this round, I'm going to give you 5 words around what's really creating hype in the landscape in AI right now, and I'd like your gut reaction to it. So if you want to take your chief information officer hat away and put a chief intuition officer hat on, I think that will be great. So in no particular order, here we go. Agentic workflows. You're allowed a word or a phrase. Go ahead.
Word or agentic workflows. Transformational. Okay, transformational. If you blend agentic workflows with context engineering, right, it is going to be truly transformational.
I think that's a good point. I think we see this to be the North Star of enterprise AI, which is not just a faster process or a workflow, but a better process. And I think that's where the context of the organization really comes in. ROI, return on investment.
Important, but organizations should allow room for innovation and R&D, right? Because we're in the early days of this innovation cycle, okay, and the velocity of change is remarkable, okay. So it has to be balanced. That would be my word.
That's a good answer. Let's talk about hallucinations. We haven't spoken about it today.
That's where our responsible AI model comes into play, right? And we're measuring the outcomes and the output coming through, and we have a model to be able to drive change as needed inside the company. It is something you cannot ignore, right? And that's why trusted models are very important. Okay, that's why I think we're focused also around looking to build some purpose-built models internally to be able to improve the quality of outcome. It is something it cannot be ignored. But the key for that is going to come down to, do you have an architectural model and governance model similar to the FAST framework we talked about, which governs it?
That's fair. Let's talk about the fourth thing, which is around sovereignty.
Sovereignty. I think the world is still reacting to this, right? And I know this was a topic in the Davos discussion, right? Reading all the press which is coming out, and I think the world is reacting to it. The world leaders are reacting to it, and I think there is a push around creating mandates and goals around how AI is going to get used and utilized. So I would say, early days, we're going to have to watch this one.
Perfect, and that brings me to my last buzzword bingo for 2026. AGI, so artificial general intelligence. What's your view on that?
I think, listen, me personally, not as a CIO, but as an engineer by trade, I'm fascinated, right? I'm fascinated because I'm going to tell you, I use AI right at home just for my own research and educational purposes. Remember, in the past, you would go to do a Google search, you do a Wikipedia search to go get the knowledge, or go to Khan Academy to watch a course. The amount of information I can get by doing research, right, is remarkable. So I think, I'm fascinated. I think it is a revolutionary solution outcome which the world is going to benefit from as it continues to improve. Okay, but at the same time, I do understand, right, there is a lot of consternation around what does this mean to human thinking. Okay, so I think the key here is, it's once again, I'll go back to my word balance, right? It's the society, in my opinion, has to find a way to blend this the right way, and future education models have to accommodate for this. Because I don't think we can live in a world where AGI or just artificial intelligence it's going to be on the wayside, right? It has to get blended into the way of life. But I think that's where I go back to, and I think you asked the question around sovereignty and governance. I think all of them have to come together.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more foundational things we'll have to contend with. And again, design businesses, societies, cultures with AI at the core. And what that means, I think it's going to look very different, and it's going to test some of our older playbooks. So, Neil, this has been wildly fascinating and incredibly insightful. Thank you for sharing your transparent and frank view around Cognizant's journey, especially as Client Zero, putting you in a unique position, as I said, and a vantage point that can help both socialize what you're doing, but also help clients when navigating these choppy waters. To our audience of CIOs and other business and technology leaders, I hope this gives you some practical advice, but also enough ambition and provocation to push your own agendas. Thank you for joining us, and I've learned a fair bit.
Nitesh, thanks for having me.